A very good morning to Brother Mando, the visitor, Brother Thomas, auxiliary visitor, all the brothers and fellow Lasallians. You know, the reason why I'm sitting here rather than standing at the podium is because I feel all of you feeling quite comfortable sitting on your chairs, and so please relax. I've only got a 15-page paper which I will read for exactly 1 hour and 25 minutes. Is it okay with you all?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course I'm not going to do that. Huh? Dear friends, you know what I intend to do is give a very simple overview of what I've put as my own thoughts and reflections as a result of listening to the many voices that I've heard over the years, especially since MALEC 4 in Sabah, and the many visits that I've made to the schools. And so my thoughts will be just reflections that we help with, that we hope will allow all of us, as part of this very important keynote address, to allow us to firstly and hopefully come to a common understanding of what is the meaning of transforming Lasallian schools in Malaysia through faith in service as community. If we as Lasallians are to move forward together, I think it's vital and important that we begin to see things in common, that we begin to understand things anew, especially in the context of the very, very difficult and changing times that we are experiencing, not just the education system and educational trends in Malaysia, but is what's happening in our whole world today. So please just relax, and I will, as I've said, I've got a very brief introduction. I've got 5 key areas that I will touch on, and I'll make a little conclusion, and we'll have time for some buzz sessions, some questions and reflections. So please relax as I try to make sense of what I have written. Firstly, as Brother Mando stated so nicely, our history, our moments of celebrations, milestones in our lives are very, very important moments when we look back at our lives. And hopefully, the more we look back at our lives, the deeper we look into our lives, hopefully we will know where we are today. Some people ask the question, hey, why is that, when you're driving in the car, why is that the front windscreen is bigger than the back view mirror? There are obvious reasons. It's because I think what is before us is more important than the past. And the reason why we are today is because of our history. And this history that began as Brother shared the life of the founder shows us very, very clearly that as we, as a Lasallian family, we have come here, and especially in the past 5 years since MALEC, and also since, I think many of you are aware, Dr. Francis Low is not here. He and his group in 2011 prepared a very, very interesting research on the way forward for the Lasallian mission schools in Malaysia. And based on that, a very conclusive and very important research paper, we identified 3 priorities for the Malaysian Lasallian family. Firstly, we say very clearly our first priority is to revitalize our Lasallian schools. Secondly, we say besides revitalizing our 44 schools, we also want to set up new educational institutions, private schools, maybe technical schools, maybe even possibly a college, a teachers training college. And thirdly, we said that these 2 new options on our part will hopefully lead us to our third and very, very fundamental option of trying to find new ways in which we can meet the needs of the young and the new poor in Malaysia. I'll come back to this point as I develop some of the thoughts. Firstly, I want to say very consciously here that this first option, which is about revitalizing our schools, wasn't just a little thing that we wanted to do, the brothers wanted to do, and the Lasallian family wanted to do because of just circumstances outside our lives. Just because some things are happening in our schools, we want to do something. I want to state very, very clearly that the brothers, the Lasallian family, when we decided on revitalization of schools, it was based on the fact that we truly believe that 160 years of Lasallian education in Malaysia is still relevant today. Still much more relevant today because what is happening to the young compared to the boys, no girls at the time who came in 1852 to Lovelane, or the time was Church Street and Bishop Street down the road. And when the brothers took over a school, that interestingly began in 1787. And our famous Mr. Francis Light, when he came to Penang, the next year, 1787, he invited the Catholic Church to start a mission school right in the middle of Georgetown. I'm saying this very consciously because if we are not convinced that the revitalization, and today at this conference we are using the word transforming, if we don't see a reason for our existence today, I think we will not have a new energy and a new creativity and a new innovative way of looking at life. And it's very, very fundamental. We must be convinced that today we can say the brothers and our Lasallian family, and that's why I think you are here. Secondly, the reason why we are convinced of the reason for our existence is because of all the formation that has taken place in the past 10 years. And Brother John de Cruz and his team, the Director of Formation, together with Brother Matthew, Isaac, those in the LaSalle Center in Ipoh, really believe that our transformation, our schools can only continue to have an impact if we ourselves are formed and hopefully transformed. The reason you are here is because of what all the programs that we have done right throughout the years. I think that's a very, very important point, because if we are going to bring this notion and the process for transforming Lasallian schools, we want to emphasize the need for formation. Thirdly, this conference, as Michael has asked you to read from the booklet, is not just hopefully a series of talks, but a process. And maybe I'll just highlight 3 words that I think are central to this process. Firstly, we are asked to try to attempt to have a deeper understanding of the world around us. Our realities of the students, the realities of the forces that are impacting. So as I go along sharing these thoughts, I also want to ask you to also look at your program and think of all the different people that will be helping us today to fulfill this aim of looking at our world. I don't need to emphasize why we need to look at the world. Obvious reason is, unless we understand what is happening in the world, we will not be able to meet the needs of the young. And that is why the second word, realities, reflection, is important. And what is reflection? Reflection is to be able to sit down and fold your arms, and in the Philippines they have this joke, they say, they'll ask what is the oldest university in the country, and people will give the answer, UST. It's called University of St. Thomas. But some people say, no, that's not the oldest university. They say the oldest university is under the Sampalok tree. Sampalok is a tamarind tree. And I think that is the way, and the knowledge, the way wisdom comes, when they're able to pull our arms and sit down and look at the sky and look at the cries of our young people and ask ourselves, what are they telling us? Because our realities is reflecting. And thirdly, the third word of response. The response as to why these realities, our reflection, and our responses will be something that will allow us to get deeper into our lives. I don't want to go into the next part where I have very briefly touched on the three parts of the program, which I just said is understanding reality, secondly, reflecting on the vision of Lasallian education, and thirdly, our plans for transformation. I just want to say a few words about the second idea, second notion of developing our Lasallian vision of faith. I think the story of John Baptist and Salle that Heckletter shared with us this morning is something that happened more than 300 years ago. I want to just draw your attention to the fact that, that this vision of faith that was brought to Malaysia after 160 years, many of us are very, very convinced that we now in Malaysia have what I call a made in Malaysia Lasallian vision. And what is this made in Malaysia Lasallian vision? I put here in my own writing here that our vision, Lasallian vision today, is one that has truly been mutually enriched by all the insights and faith reflections of all our students, of all our teachers who have gone through our schools. It is no more just a very, very abstract idea of what is a Lasallian vision, but very consciously what has happened in Semenanjung, what has happened in Sabah and Sarawak is very much a part of our reformulation of what is Lasallian vision. I think this is very, very important, and this is very important because basically we cannot be creative and innovative unless we find an education that meets the needs of our nation and meets the needs of our people. And today, without going into too many details, we try to show that the vision of faith, service and community has to be seen in a new context and with new conditions. I'll give you some examples as we go along as to what this vision of faith of yourself means. I think I'll now go on to the next part of this was the introduction, a very long introduction, but my first point is the realities of the world today. It is obvious that the postmodern world, the world that we live today, not just a modern world, a postmodern world, not only the adults or the adult world, we are all being challenged to have a deeper understanding of the needs of the young so that we can respond to their genuine needs. I've shared even 2 or 3 indicators as to how to read the lives of the young today. We as teachers, we as adults need to move or shift from just being teachers to listeners and adults as mutual learners. Why is there a change in the context of the modern world today? We know the world today is one where the changes that we see around us, we do not understand why they are changes. What is change? Change sometimes is only seen as the external, outer manifestations of things that are happening around us. But the word transformation is slightly different. If you want to make transformation to any situation, it is not just about knowing what is happening outside, but understanding what is happening inside. because the chaos, the crisis, the type of values, the trends in today towards materialism, consumerism, various forms of hedonism and secularism, they are not just things that are happening outside, there's something happening within the human. So that is why I began by saying that the Lasallian vision brought to us has already gradually been incarnating in what I call the religio-cultural values and ethos of our Asian peoples. You walk along Julius Street and the other street around, you'll see a whole row of mosques, temples, churches, Hindu temples, Chinese temples. What I'm trying to say is that the way in which we as educators look at life will have to be in a holistic way, or what I call an integrated way. And what is the essence of trying to understand the inner workings of life today? We today realize that there is some very, very deep connection between the outer lives of all of us, the way we think, the way we feel, and what is happening in our hearts and in our lives. And this is where, when we talk today of the crisis of civilization, crisis of humanity, many of us have come to the conclusion that there is something happening to the soul of human persons and to the heart of humanity. What you must have read in the papers 2-3 days ago about this young man who was asked to transfer school after he got a 7A for his SPM. You know what happened to him? He hanged himself in his room. Another son of a doctor in Kuala Lumpur, he jumped down to the 5th floor of a building going into college. Dear friends, what I'm trying to say is that when we see these external things happening, we don't ask why. We just take it for a fact that something is happening to people, but we don't understand why. So very briefly, as educators, I think we need to understand the restlessness in young people today. Why are they restless? Have they lost any meaning in their lives? What is it that is frightening them? Tomorrow, Mr. Justin will talk a little bit about the media-oriented world today that has really crept into our lives. I'm not talking about the negative effects of media. No, I'm talking about the negative. But unless and until we understand these trends, I think we will not be able to address this. Secondly, in order to understand what's happening to the young, I think we need, as adults, to also win the confidence of young people. When I say adults, I'm talking about our political leaders, our church leaders, our religious leaders, our parents, our teachers. I think one of the insights or one of the ways in which young people begin to challenge and to question authority and adults is because now more and more the young people are not interested with answers. They want to ask questions. Are we ready to go to the level to give answers to the questions as to why such a thing is happening? And that is why in this context, the young people very often claim today that when adults don't walk the talk, we just walk away. You can see the restlessness in classrooms, the vision problems we have in school. I think there's something happening to their inner lives, and unless and until we understand what is happening to their inner lives, I think we will not be able to accompany them and journey with them. I think another dimension that we as educators try to look at reality today, I think need to ask ourselves what are our own deeper meanings in life that will allow us to not just be changed externally, but allow the young people to see that if we want to change the outside world that is broken and fragmented, there has to be an inner change. And that is where the word transformation makes a lot of sense today. Why is even the government talking about transformation? As I think there's now changes about very often about the external, transformation is about the inner person. The best example that will come to my mind as to make a distinction between the word transformation, change and transformation is, if a caterpillar eats and eats and eats and eats the leaves and shoots or whatever it is, what happens to the caterpillar? It grows bigger in size, gets heavier, but maybe the skin texture may change all on the outside. But what happens to the caterpillar? Decides to say that I don't want to be a caterpillar for the rest of my life, eating and growing, but I want to see how I can rediscover my inner identity and the essence for which I was made. And that is what the caterpillar, all caterpillars are meant to be one, butterflies. And that butterflyness can only emerge if we are ready to go into silence, into reflection, into contemplation. I think this is the crisis of humanity today. Young people don't want to be part of the rat race. You know why? Because they realize today more and more that they are not rats. They don't need to be part of the rat race, but they are all members of the human race. I think this very, very, very fundamental understanding that we as educators need to communicate with them. And this is where the Lasallian vision, mission, ethos is not something about telling them how there is a caterpillar in you, or how there's why there's a butterfly in you, but make the school an environment, an ecology, a nursery where they can grow up to rediscover their full dimensions of life. I'm talking to teachers, so I don't have to tell you what is happening in our classrooms. I don't have to tell you today that the workforce in Malaysia, the article that I received the other day, 77% of the workforce in Malaysia is unskilled labor today. 480,000 students go through SPM every year, 480,000. And this year we were so proud. You know why? We had 550 who got all A's. So what is 550 over 480,000? Take out a calculator and you'll know it adds up to 0.12%. We are talking about education where 0.12% of the students get A's, and we don't think of the 98.8% of those that we know are not going to go to universities, or not going to get an opportunity for higher education. They're going to have an STM with what I call with a CDFG. What G? CDFG. Get C's and D's and E's and F's in the SPM certificate that qualifies them for two things, for unemployment and joblessness. That's what I'm trying to say at this very, very crucial point that I'm trying to make is that we need to make our schools transformative by not just trying to change the students, but we ourselves as educators become people who will communicate to them through our lives a new vision of life. I'll move from there to my second point to ask ourselves a little bit more few thoughts and as to how we understand this inculturated, incarnated or rediscovered meaning of Lasallian education in the context of Malaysia. And I begin by sharing a few thoughts on how the Lasallian vision has three constitutive parts or dimensions. Firstly is to see things, life, events, persons with the eyes of faith. How do we move from just looking at life and persons from just a materialistic human perspective to really a holistic perspective? I'm not talking about but discovering people. I'm talking about our own perspectives that need to have a faith dimension. I mentioned here very briefly that in the past we thought knowing, teaching will help to change people. But we know today that changing people is very different from transforming people. And that is where that we need to allow our young people today to experience moments in their life where they move from what? Just the knowing of facts and figures and knowledge to move into a deeper understanding of life, reflecting, and the third word that I used this morning is responding. How do we integrate this knowing, understanding and responding? I think this is part of the challenge of looking at life with the eyes of faith. And what is the eyes of faith? Faith are our basic and fundamental beliefs. Our faith is our fundamental beliefs based on our cultural values, our religious values, something that we believe. But faith in itself is incomplete when what we believe is not related to how we live. What we believe and how we live is what causes the bringing together of the three R's, our knowing with our mind, our reflecting with our hearts, and responding not just with our hands. Some of us think, or many of us think, that response means to do something. No, I don't think that's the real meaning of response. Real meaning of response is how do we, at this present moment of life, having in mind our ideals, having in mind our aspirations, having in mind in our hearts our hopes, how do I begin to interact with the reality that I have seen? My point is very simple. If you see somebody in need of help, what do you do? Will you tell yourself, I'll try to do something tomorrow for you? I think that is not response. Response is what? To be converted at this very moment as to how I'm going to change my thinking, my feeling, maybe a facial expressions, maybe an outreaching of my hands, to make sure that my faith becomes a relational faith. That my belief becomes how I share my kind words, I share my... You all know as teachers the number of times you get it. As we were talking to Dorothy during our lunchtime and the dinner time, and they're talking of all the stress and the difficulties that teachers go through every day. And this is where our faith vision comes into mind. How do we look at that? Do you want to correct them immediately to the ways of the world today? The world has got two very clear ways today. You want to correct people, you do two things. Or you want to change people, you do two things. But first is what? Lucy knows that with a rotan, punishment. The other is what? Through reward. The world today wants to change people through rewards and punishment. We are talking of transforming people not through reward and punishment, but for them to allow them to get into the heart and the center of their being and ask, hey, what do I want to do with my life? It begins with quest. It begins with questions. But you know adults, we don't like questions. Jan can tell you, Rain is all the time at home asking, Mommy, why? Mommy, why? Mommy, see, shut up, don't ask me why. I don't know whether we as teachers don't say that verbally, but deep down in our hearts, I think this is a fundamental need that our eyes of faith allows us to not just look at life, but look at life from what I call a transcendental perspective. We don't no longer see from the eyes of faith human beings. What do we see? Hopefully we will see from our own faith traditions that we see the life of God, we see the image of God deep down in the hearts of our spirits. And this is where this need for eyes of faith that allows us to give us new options in life. The perspective that the way we look at people, I think, defines the way we relate with people. True, isn't it? For example, in Sabah they always say, when you look at the tree in Sabah, you know what they see? They see dollar signs on the tree. They don't look for the durian, they don't look for the rambutan. Meaning what? Your perspective in life. And I think we are becoming very clear today, although most of us talk of monotheism as God in our lives, we've got a new God today called money theism. That God becomes the money. And that is because we are slowly moving towards a life where we only see the material aspects of life, the external parts of life, changes that are happening, but we are not ready. And this is where I think the eyes of faith allows us to see the life of the young people today and their compulsive consumerism, various forms of materialism, even their inability to see right from wrong. It's very strange, how when the inner light goes out, sometimes in your mind tells you, I remember this little story that I've shared many times with my friends, and this is a story of how a little boy, I think it was from standard 3 or standard 4, he was at a children's home, and his friend comes and complains to the house mother, this guy, Johnny, stole my pencil. Then the house mother goes to the student and asks, checks his pencil box and finds his pencil there. And asks him, hey, when did you steal the pencil? No, teacher, I didn't steal the pencil. But the pencil is in your box. No, actually I didn't steal. I liked the pencil, so I took it. This thing is right from wrong. And this is very, very real. And not just in our lives, but in the lives of young people. And therefore what I'm trying to say is the eyes of faith moves us. Without the eyes of faith, life becomes a life and vision of what I call the material world. Not talking of Mandula or Lady Gaga. Life is just external. And this is where the eyes of faith, coming from our Asian tradition, allows us to see the deeper dimensions of life. And thirdly, that once we begin to see, focus on the inner cries and pains of human persons, when we look closely at the faces today, I think one of the things that John Baptist at Salle most probably why he moved out from his big palace and his big church and his big buildings and his power and status, maybe as he walked along the streets of Reims and maybe as Mother Teresa of Calcutta, as he walked through the streets of Calcutta as a teacher in her school, she got close to people and saw the tears in their eyes. I think this is very, very important thing that should be an offshoot of our eyes of faith. That we begin to see within human beings their pains. Why? Because pain, we know, is a negation of life. Grief, pain, anguish is a negation of what God means in our lives, and that is where once we believe that it is only a new sensitivity to pain in the world that will allow God to be restored in our souls. All our Asian religions, all our Asian prophets, all our scriptures, the Asian scriptures, Buddhism, Hinduism, very interestingly links our passion for God with compassion for humanity. That makes a lot of sense. I think if we are filled as teachers with faith, of course the first thing that we'll do is what? We'll look for the least, like a mother, she has got 3 children, one cannot come and complain why the mother and the father is so special to them when they are sick. Of course, why we look forward. We look for those in pain. Why? To convert that pain and grief into what? Into joy and hope. I think that is the essence of our education. So therefore we know that this eyes of faith is a Lasallian way of looking at life. A Lasallian way that allows us to provide not just food, shelter and clothing to our students, but very interestingly, once we begin to see the distortion of what I call the hole in the soul, the hole in the soul, where today secularizing forces can take away the heart of God from our lives. And that very often leads to a loss of self-image, loss of dignity, loss of self-worth. And this is where education today more and more is not about what? Giving people a piece of certificate. but restoring their confidence, their dignity. I was in St. Paul's, Hari Anugrah. It's so nice to see the students going up, I think some of them were not from the good classes, so-called all the 8A students, but they can go up with pride, those that were good in sports, those who were good in games, those who were in the cadet, and they were all honored. Indirectly, what are we doing to them? We are restoring their dignity, we are restoring their confidence. Because education, especially for the weak, is about what? Raising their self-image. And then we will come back later to see how transforming Lasallian education is about. Secondly, this eyes of faith, what does it do? Besides helping us to recognize the beauty of individuals, of persons, their talents, secondly, what happens is we will slowly and gradually, as John Baptist Lasalle himself pointed out, that this eyes of faith will allow us to view the plans of God for human persons and the whole of humanity. In simple language, it simply means once you look at faith, what happens? It is no more our human plans. It is no more plans that we have as to what is the meaning of national development, what is the meaning of national education. We'll begin to understand the core and important values that are part of plans of God. I believe plans of God are basically two. Firstly, He wants all of us to live in freedom. You know what is freedom? Freedom is not about running wild in the streets. Freedom is to make choices for what is right and what is good. Because we believe God, from our religious perspective, is about goodness. When there is goodness, there is God. And therefore we begin to see the goodness of God's plan, not just for ourselves as individuals, but for the larger community. That's why we are so proud of our Lasallian teachers, our Lasallian administrators. Over all these years, they have really worked for the common good. And I think, and goodness in that the young people. And therefore that view of the plan of God is slowly a gradual the negation of the whole total plan of God, not just for myself, me for me by myself, but together with others and for others, allows us to slowly serve this eyes of faith, or this faith acts as an antidote to remove those viruses that are infecting our whole computer system today. And what is this virus? This new antivirus? It is no more about selfishness, no more about individualism. It is no more about myself. It is about the good of the whole community. Dear friends, I don't want to go into the details of how today this inability for human beings to see the general plan of God for each human person and humanity is what are causing very, very serious policy implications in life. I just give you one example. But I used the word this morning, gratuitous education. I think this is a very, very important principle that we as Malaysians and everybody need to believe. How many of you parents here charge your children for meals at home? How much do you charge them for board and lodging? Any of you does that? Of course we don't. Why? It is your responsibility to what? To look after the children. You brought the children into life. It is your responsibility. They're not going to pay you now. Hopefully they're going to pay for you in your old age. You know what is my point? And that if we care for the young, there must be some way in which education of the young must be totally free. Otherwise they will agree with me here. This is one example of a point. And that's why I think John Baptist Lasalle knew that this is a fundamental right. We need to reduce prices for our food. We need to reduce our medical service. I'm giving an example of how the larger plan of God, seen as the eyes of faith, will throw away certain principles that has been the norm of our education system, norm of our society. Many years ago, most of our civilizations accepted slavery as something normal. Today, slavery is, although there are very subtle forms of slavery today, human trafficking. Today, hopefully, most of us in this room believe that death penalty is a moral evil. You all believe or not? You all believe? Give me an example. I think it is this commitment to this principle that free education, abolishment of slavery, abolishment of death penalty, don't just use punishment to correct people, improve the education system. Why can you buy billions of dollars worth of submarines that don't fly and planes that don't dive? Oh, sorry. you know what I'm saying now. Why, what has gone wrong with our priorities? I think it has gone wrong with our priorities because we don't see the importance of the values of what? Of free education, meeting the basic needs of the people. Why is that we are only allowing 20% of students to go into universities, so the 80% have become dropouts? I'm just trying to say. So indirectly, the plans of God becomes clear in our mind. We will have criteria for judging what is happening around us. And this is where the eyes of faith, the plans of God. And third, what happens? As a result of we beginning to not just look at our own individual private plans as a nation, as a people, as a community, as an ethnic group, but truly as one family, one Malaysian. The third thing that happens is we will no longer be interested in our own glory. And John Baptist Lasallian says, the third part of the vision of faith is that we attribute all to the glory of God without self-seeking and self-gain. What is the implication? Eyes of faith, plans of God. Who is important? I'm no more important. We as Lasallian are no more important in the sense, because we are not there to seek glory ourselves. Because we know by giving glory to God, hopefully the young people will see on our faces a reflection of the face of God. They know we are not out for gain, out for fame. We are out to show that, hey, deep down inside, it is not my glory, it's God's glory to our lives. So these are three fundamental things that very briefly I try to summarize. Not all of them, but are essential components of what is our vision of faith. My third point, very briefly, which is the second word, faith, service. What is service? We used to think that service is about giving things, doing things. I think that is not the essence of service from this faith perspective. What is service? Service basically, we believe, is something that moves us from within the inside, moves us not with our hands, maybe not with even our words, but with the way people look at our lives. I talked very briefly just now about how teaching and teaching people about obligations sometimes we think can correct people, but we know today there are two things that we need to be very conscious about, and these two words are talking and taking. What is talking? Talking is preaching, talking is teaching, telling people about all the good ways in which young people should be involved in service. I want to make a conclusion, not a conclusion but a summary, and that this talking and taking culture is part of today's society. When I say taking means, what do I mean? All of us, many of us teachers today, civil servants, politicians, businessmen, we take our salaries, isn't it? We take salaries, we get our salaries, and we think when we take salaries, we need to give. And what do we give? We give service. But very often this service is limited in terms of time, energy, effort. If service is going to be really authentic, I think we need to move away from the idea of not just teaching or talking and taking, but what I call receiving and giving. I think this is a very, very, very fundamental idea. What is receiving? I think the first thing that we receive, all of you, each of us, we have received what? What have you received, Mr. Low? Yeah. Why were you sitting in the room? Yeah, why are you sitting in the room? You have been chosen. You have received what? Your education, your parents brought you up. Unless and until we know what we have received, I believe we will never be able to give. And this receiving comes from where? Comes from a faith perspective, comes from God. And it is this God that will tell us, hey, you're okay as it is. You don't need to put a Rolex watch on your left hand to show who you are. You don't need to ride a BMW, to tell everybody where you live. No, you're not trying to say that. Right? It's not always like, and it is, I think, very, very briefly, I just want to conclude this part by saying, this service is not about doing things for people, it is not giving things to people. It is about what? It is about giving a part of ourselves. And I think one of the most difficult things to give today is smiles. Yeah, except for James, like he's smiling all the time. No, meaning what? That nothing to do with things that you do. Your presence, your smile, your gestures, your kindness. I think this is the way we today in Lasallian education try to define service. And finally, community. I don't have much time. This state is supposed to. I'll try to rush through that's what I say is community. I don't yesterday Brother Dodo mentioned the quotation, but how original inspiration the founder has led us to recognize that the word association also takes on a new meaning from the faith perspective. And what is basically the new meaning of association today? Firstly, there can be no association without what? Without unity. The family can be an association, but it can tend towards an association giving priority to its functional responsibilities. We do things for people, but there is no semblance of unity. That's why Brother Dodo's second point yesterday, but how it is friendships that allow us to bring about unity, where we don't just know each other by name, but know our dreams, know our aspirations, and from there a deeper association based on our own friendships. The second point on community is that unless and until this unity among ourselves moves us towards out of our own self-made goals, we will never become a community that's associated, unless, as I put here in my paper, unless there are attempts made to respond more radically to the needs of those in pain outside our own little club, own little association. So we cannot separate faith in God from what? Our relationship with others and our mission. The artificial separation of mission, association and faith can only be integrated when we discover new ways of association. And therefore, I think I've already mentioned in passing just now the importance of how, unless and until we find new ways of responding to the needs of the young today in Malaysia, and the Lasallian Association can gradually become just a Lasallian club. Not as a club. I think those in Penang know the Turkey Club. He's laughing. What's the difference between an association and a club and a community? Very often the clubs exist for its own interests of its own members, its own needs, very often for its own status or its own glory. But our Lasallian understanding of community and association is always for moving out to new areas, new margins of society, to rediscover those most in pain, those most in need of God's help and God's assistance. I'll move on from there to the last part, which is the fifth section, which I've entitled Transforming Lasallian Schools in Malaysia. I've got here, this is a very, very simple reason besides the faith reflections that we are doing now, with the faith, understanding of our faith, Lasallian faith vision in Malaysia. I've moved on to the next section to show that transforming Lasallian schools is not just an idea that has come from us. I think you're all aware of the statements of both our Prime Minister and also our Minister of Education, how there's an ongoing dialogue with different groups in the country, and they have identified 9 key areas of our education roadmap. I'm sure you all are aware, isn't it? Mr. Lowe, we talked about it the other day. You all are aware. And I think I just want to mention in passing that the government has initiated 9 areas. The 9 areas are, I don't know why, I don't know what is the order of importance. But the first point is teachers. I don't know whether there's a crisis among teachers today in the education system. The type of stress, in fact I was at one of these dialogues recently, and very interesting comments made by some other people. They said Malaysia is one of the few countries around in the region where the teachers are the most stressed and the most loaded with all types of work, especially paperwork and all types of things, making assessments, having schools with with a whole lot of subjects and curriculum and workload. So I think maybe this is something that we need to think about in terms of our Lasallian teachers. How are we going to really journey with our teachers? Second point, school leadership. Third, school quality. Fourth, curriculum and assessment. Fifth, mastering various languages. Sixth, post-secondary education. Seventh, parents and community. Number 8, effectiveness and efficiency of resources and education delivery system. And number 9, comprehensive evaluation. I don't think this is just for us to keep at the back of our minds as part of our process for discernment during this MALEC. We can really identify some key areas that I think we can help to contribute towards this ongoing feedback that the Ministry of Education is asking. I will just in conclusion mention four key areas that I think we can focus on. I think first is the role of our consciousness as a community of educators in Malaysia, whether we want to continue being in true partnerships with as many people as possible for the sake of our children. And what is that partnership? Definitely with the government, get our boards involved, most important, get our parents involved. I was talking to Ms. Lowe yesterday about the importance of parents dialoguing with the parents. If they have problems, difficulties with the students, bring the parents in. Of course with our alumni, and very importantly today more and more, to bring our so-called, not just our alumni, but the larger community, to tell them, hey, we are helping your children, please, the business community, come and be with us. Come and help us in our technical schools, come and give us donations, come and help us. I think this principle is something that we as the Lasallians need to speak to them. And with regard to policies of the government, inviting, and this is where the Lasalle brothers in Malaysia are very happy that our new Yayasan Lasalle, which has been founded more than 10 years ago, hopefully will be the new engine for us to self-sustain our Lasallian educational transformation. I think, secondly, I think besides this larger association, we need to find new ways of developing new network of relationships within the school. Make the school a real educative community. Open our doors, let the parents come in, let everybody come in within the school, and especially the young people. I think this calls for a change of mind, especially I think the need for us to very clearly and vocally tell people outside, we are not about one race, one religion, we are about the well-being of all Malaysians. And the more of our heads, our teachers, hopefully they are reflective of the Malaysian population. I think our schools should be models of such exemplary unity shown. The third point is that, which is the final point, that we today have become very conscious today, not just in the level of society. I've heard this heard people use this word before about the need for student empowerment through participation. I think there are some schools, for example, Lasalle KK, where they have a parliamentary system in the school. There are other places where students have a more active say in what is happening in the school. Will there a time come when the Board of Governors can also invite students and have a formal consultation with the students? Hey, what do you want from your education? What do you want for the future? What do you want for post-secondary education? What can we do for you? I think today the challenge of educators is, unless and until we begin to, as I said just now, dialogue with them, understand their needs, and make them feel that they are part of the school. They are not just told to be students in the school to do what the adults tell them. But I think this is, for me, a very important fourth and final challenge that we hope that the Lasallian education. So I want to conclude by saying that this hopefully new faith vision, new ways in which we relate among ourselves and with the students, among ourselves as teachers and board members and the brothers, that there will be some form of what Brother Edmando yesterday also mentioned again, two very key words. Unless we have a new faith vision, unless we relate in a new way, don't talk about innovation and creativity. It can be about maintenance. If we go about continuing what we're doing 160 years, that innovation and creativity, especially in a new context, can only come through a new energy. A new energy, a new strength that allows us hopefully to what? To see anew, understand in a renewed way, and hopefully our lives as educators will touch the young in a new way. And I'm very confident and that with all the deep and profound faith traditions that we have, that the only way forward for us is a path to hope. Our association can give hope. Hopefully our mission will be a joy. So the Lasallian family gathered in the next 3 days and really look forward with hope. I think you are the hope sitting here as to how the Lasalle brothers will have full confidence, especially now with the formation of a Lasallian in East Asia district, with Edmando is here, with the Tom, the John Pitt is also from Park. That we can assure you that we will journey with all our Lasallian educators to really find new ways of catering to the young. Thank you.